This past week in wrestling headlines, Flow Wrestling made a pretty big announcement about an event coming this season that I know you are not going to want to miss. They also held their annual Who's Number One high school event showing off those top recruits in the country. I'm going to get to some of the results as well as other wrestling headlines, like there was a former college wrestler who had a pretty nice fight this weekend. Spencer Lee had a fun show appearance. But first, let's get into this first topic of the NWCA All-Star Classic making its return this season. It'll be returning on November 22nd in Austin, Texas. This will be streamed on Flow Wrestling. And this, if you don't know, this is awesome. I mean, this has featured past matches like David Taylor and Kyle Dake in the past. It's been 4 years since this event has happened. So since the start of Fanco Wrestling, this has not happened. So I'm excited to share in that with you. If you're wondering what some of those matchups are, here's a brief glimpse at these matchups thanks to Bastard for this graphic. The one I'm most looking forward to is definitely Carter Starocci versus Mekhi Lewis. That's an event that, that's the national finals match from this past season that we probably weren't going to get again until the national finals, but now we're going to get it at the beginning of the season. We also will see David Carr versus Quincy Monday, two guys bumping up to 165 pounds. There's another 165-pound match with Dean Hamidi and Keegan O'Toole. I'm looking forward to 149 with Sammy Sasso and Austin Gomez. And then 141, we're really going to see who deserves that number one spot at the beginning of the season. Cole Matthews of Pitt or Real Woods. Those are two top contenders at 141 pounds. And then at the other end, at heavyweight, we have Anthony Cassiope versus Greg Kirkley. This is just a star-studded event. That's why it's called the All-Star Classic. And I can't wait to see really who these top wrestlers are at the beginning of the season, what gains they've made in the offseason, and what that's going to look like. And please, let me know, comment below which match you are most looking forward to at the All-Star Classic. Is it Mekhi versus Starocci? Is it another one? I'd like to know what you have to say. And speaking of Who's Number One, right? Flow Wrestling held their annual high school event of Who's Number One, showcasing the top high school talent in the country. It was a spectacular event. Production value was even better than it has been in the past. And they've always have pretty high production values, but I like seeing them step it up. But the matches, wow, these matches were great. Here are a couple that I want you to be aware of. The first one is Rocco Welsh versus Josh Barr. Welsh is a Waynesburg wrestler back from my neck of the woods in Western Pennsylvania in the Whippeal. He is committed to Ohio State. Well, he beat future Penn Stater Josh Barr by a score of 5-4. It was an awesome match. It was the main event of the entire night. Another match that you should be aware of is Ben Davino. He wrestled Mark Anthony McGowan, and he cradled him up. Look at that. This is on Flow Wrestling's Instagram. Cradled him up at the end of the second period, but time expired. Unfortunately, time expired there. Otherwise, man, who knows what would have happened. But this was an Iron Man rematch. So these are, again, two of the top wrestlers in the country. Davino ended up avenging that Iron Man loss that he had by a score of 6-3 in this Who's Number One event. Another incredible match that I would recommend checking out, all these are on Flow Wrestling, is Michigander Bo Mantanona. He pinned future Nittany Lion Tyler Kasich. He just half Nelson, stacked him up in a half Nelson and pinned him on the edge of the mat in the first period. And man, you see him getting just psyched up. He's super excited that he secured that number one spot now in the country at his weight. And the last big match, they were all, I recommend going through all of them, but the last big one that I want to talk about is with a Ferrari. Angelo Ferrari. There was actually a four-way kind of match going on at 165 pounds, and Angelo Ferrari ended up coming out on top. He won the first match by decision. His second match he won by major decision and ended up taking that 165-pound spot. It's been some time since we've seen him. It's good to see some good news from the Ferrari family after all the craziness that's kind of been going on in the last couple months. But we'll see where Angelo Ferrari ends up going to school in college, because all of these guys, right? Welsh, Davino, Mantanona, Ferrari. That's one of the things I'm most excited for, is seeing these guys in college. Because watching college wrestling is, I love watching college wrestling, but you also sometimes forget how exciting high school wrestling is. for me, it's like comparing, there's pro football, which I don't really watch pro football as much. I don't think it's as exciting as college football, mostly because college football can be a little bit more chaotic. And that's kind of how the high school wrestling is, to me at least, compared to college wrestling. You have, in college, there's a lot more control of guys, especially like on top. You don't necessarily see a lot of like really exciting rides on top or turns, depending on, who's wrestling. But in high school, there's a lot more chaos, especially in these top guys. So it was just a very, very fun event. And before I get into some of the when I think the Big Ten schedule is going to release, what I want to show first is this Bryce Meredith fight. So Meredith is in his third pro fight, and he actually fought, and he ended up submitting him in the first round with a rear naked choke, winning his third pro fight. And I'm excited to see, I know that Bo Nickel, that's like one of the big things, big guys right now, college wrestler, going fighting pro, fought in the Dana White Contender Series. I'm still getting into pro fighting, MMA, and I would love to see Bryce Meredith, step into that Contender Series, and where we really see him compete at that high level that Bo Nickel's also competing at. And so far, he showed that he's 3-0 with this submission over the weekend. It was pretty awesome. And a couple of fun stories to share too here is Orine actually over the past couple weeks, past couple months probably, has been designing this shirt for the NC State Wolfpack. You see some of his designs right here. This is on NC State Athletics Twitter. And he designed this right here. You can see this for all these student athletes and all the fans to wear to the Pack United football game. We had the chance to interview him on our show a couple of months ago, and it was funny. He designs his own tattoos. He tattooed his own mom and some of his teammates, which is a really neat story. But now I like seeing what these guys are doing off of the mat, other than just wrestling. What are they involved in? And it's really cool that Orine was highlighted here. And speaking of highlighted, was Spencer Lee. Spencer Lee was highlighted in the Barstool pre-show. This was before the football game over the weekend, and you see Dave Portnoy, I think he's the president of Barstool. I'm not a huge Barstool guy, but I know a lot of people are big fans of him, and he's talking about how he's excited that, or when he thinks of Iowa, he thinks of a few things. One is corn, two is Dan Gable and wrestling, and you know that Spencer Lee was real excited to hear that. But I like seeing them bring guys, bring wrestlers onto the show. I know one of the big things this week that people are pushing for is, because College Game Days at App State, is to have John Milner, the All-American from App State, as a game show, the picker for the game show this weekend on College Game Day, which would be really, really cool if he ended up getting on there. That hasn't been announced yet, but I think it'd be very, very cool. And by the way, I also wanted to mention, I talk mostly about college wrestling, folk style wrestling, but the Senior World Championships are going on right now. If you want to watch those, I have a link down below. You can watch them on Flow Wrestling. The women's freestyle is going on right now. Max Dowry placed in Greco over the weekend. He placed 5th. Kayla Miracle, just as the recording of this video, advanced to the women's freestyle finals. And then later on in the week, you'll be able to watch the men's freestyle championships as well. You see wrestlers like Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Dake, David Taylor, Yanni, and I'm excited to see how those guys do. I know Jordan Burroughs is seeking history with winning another world championship this weekend. I really hope that he does it. Okay. I've been alluding to it all show with the Big Ten. There have been some schedule announcements over the past week. One of them is UNC. They announced their schedule. The only ACC schedule we're waiting on now is NC State, but we can kind of piece that together based on every other schedule that's been released, with Pitt, with Virginia Tech, with UNC now, who has a pretty tough schedule here. Ohio State and Michigan at home, App State at home, Virginia Tech and NC State also at home. It's going to be a heck of a season. Coleman Scott says it's going to be a fantastic season, and it sure is. And the Big Ten, I expect that schedule to release this week, because you see from my tweet here, they released their schedules last year on September 14th, and that is approaching this week. So could we see that? I really hope we do. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for those schedules to release, you can check out this playlist where I dive into the weekly weight by weight previews from 125 all the way up through heavyweight. I'm going week by week. You can check out that full playlist here.